So this is the Minnie Mouse dress that I've got that is too big for me. But I had the idea, because I love the print on it, to make it into 2 items. So what I want to do is to make a skirt out of it and some form of top. So to start that process, because this is made out of jersey fabric, I've used my clips to clip the hems together. And then I've done the same with some pins, just pinning the 2 seams together just to try and keep it as straight as possible, because unfortunately jersey is notorious for moving when you cut. So the next thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to measure from the bottom to how far up I want to cut to create the skirt, and then we will go from there. Okay, so to measure out where I'm going to cut off for the skirt, I know that just below my knee is the length of this particular measuring board. And I also know that my elastic, which is what I'm going to use for the waistband, just a black elastic, is 2 inches wide. So then I've taken off that measurement and then an extra inch so that it will sit just above my knee, hopefully. And then measured from there to the top of this board, and that is where I'm going to make my cut. I then mark it off with a chalk pencil, and I've already done this side, so as you can see these are my little chalk marks. That is that measurement along the front, and now I'm going to flip it over, do it on the same on the other side, and then we can cut the top away from the bottom. So I've done the same on the back. Here are my guidelines. Now all there is to do is to cut the top from the bottom. So what I'll probably do is I'll take out the pin here, which is closest to this bit, make sure that my 2 lines either side are matching up, snip, and then cut the back side and then the front side, because if I cut them both together, my measurements were completely pointless, because sometimes on dresses you'll find that they're not necessarily made symmetrically, and I might end up actually with a wonky line. So that's why I'm going to do it this way. So as you can see, I'm sort of using those lines as a guideline rather than having to draw one big line all the way across, to make sure my line stays steady. I've reached the other end. I'm going to flip this over and do the same on the other side. So I'm just finishing off cutting the other side. Again, trying to be as smooth as I possibly can, following those markers that I made for myself. Just got that last little bit to go, so I'm going to just spread out the fabric. Might need to remove this pin as well to do that, actually. Let me rearrange, 1 second. So I've just rearranged my fabric so that I can see this line and where it meets the other side. And I'm just going to cut that like so. And now I have 2 pieces. We have a t-shirt piece here, but I will do something with later. I haven't quite decided what yet. So we're just going to pop that to one side. But we should now have a skirt. And here we have the bottom of the dress. So that's the original hem along there. And that's where we've cut. I have just added some clips and some pins to hold it in place for the time being. But as you can see, it looks quite boxy at the moment. But my plan is to do an elasticated waistband. And I'll show you as best as I can on my sewing machine how you're going to be able to gather that top to give it a bit more shape. I will say that obviously this fabric is stretchy as well, so I do have to bear that in mind. It may mean that I have to put a couple of pleats in, or maybe run a runner stitch around the top before I do the attaching of the elastic. Like I said, the elastic is black, and so to save on fabric, I'm not actually going to do a waistband. I'm just going to leave the waistband black, and then we'll come back once I start to put that bit together. So this is the kind of elastic that I'm using. As you can see, it's about 2 inches wide and it is black. I've then gone ahead and cut a piece that is relevant to my waist size. I actually I actually cut this so that it was half an inch bigger than my waist, so that I could put an inch seam in, which would then make it technically half an inch smaller than my waist. But because it's elastic, that's fine, because you kind of do want it to pull you in and nip you in a little bit, but not to the point that it's uncomfortable, and half an inch is about right. So I've just pinned this into place. I will first sew it down the middle and then sew it back flat, so that then that would be the outside that you would see, so it looks a lot neater. And then we'll do our gathering trick. So we're now going to work on making the waistband for the skirt transformation thingamajig. So I'd obviously pinned it to show you what it would look like when it was finished in the previous section. So now I'm actually going to sew it together. So obviously I've pinned it in place, but because of the way your sewing machine works, you'll actually want to make sure when you put your pins through the machine, especially if you're going to allow your machine to go over them, that you switch which direction they're in. So let's change them so they're this way, so that the thick ends are on the outside of the machine when you put it through. As I mentioned before, I'm going to be doing an inch seam or stitch. So on my sewing machine here, I've got little increments that say like quarter, half, and then a full inch stitch, so I know where to line the edge of my fabric up. So I line my edge of my fabric up with that 1 inch marker all the way into the machine. I'm then just going to drop the foot down, otherwise it won't let me go on this one anyway. It's sort of like an inbuilt safety feature. I've just got my actual sewing machine on a standard stitch, 2.5 in its distancing. On sewing machines you can change depending on what you're trying to achieve, and I'm just going to stitch this together and then fold back the sides and stitch those as well. So I'm just snipping away those excess threads, and I am using one of my favourite tools when I'm doing sewing projects, although I'm probably due a new pair, are these little tiny scissors. They are so useful for so many things. They're great for getting really up close and cutting off threads. I also find them really helpful for when doing like unpicking stuff, because I find an unpicker actually can be quite harsh, whereas these you can just snip through the threads because they're so thin. They're a great tool to have. I'm going to take out my pins now of where I've just stitched the first stitch. Now the band is together, but we've got this flappy bit here and we don't want that. So I'm going to fold these sides down either side like that, and then I'm going to pin these into place. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch across, down, up, and then come back down to cross across the bottom. That way it's going to give me a really sturdy area for where I have sewn the two pieces together to make the band. I'm also going to change up my stitch for this. I'm going to be doing a zigzag stitch for this, just because I find that it just gives it a bit more sturdy feel to the actual fabric, and this will hold that really nice and tightly in place. So I'm just cutting away any of the like excess threads, especially on the side that's going to be visible, which will be this side, even on the camera, so that you don't see the two joints there. And that is my waistband done. Next thing to do is to put a base stitch around the top of the skirt to try and stop it from stretching too much when I then come to do the sort of gathering, because I use a trick method to get more even gather rather than me have to sit and pleat it as I go along. So to do this, I have set my sewing machine. You can do this by hand stitching, but I've decided I am going to do it on my sewing machine. So the normal stitch, like I used earlier on, but I've widened the stitch to the maximum I can go on this machine, which is 5 or 5.0. I've also taken the pins out of the top of this particular skirt, and I tend to like to start from a seam before I put it through. Obviously this is, you don't want to be like too deep in your stitch like I was last time, because this is just to sort of hold the fabric in place while I put the waistband in. So this time I'm using my 1/4 inch marker to mark where I'm going to let the fabric run through at, because I don't need this to be too deep, because obviously it's going to get attached to the waistband, but I also don't want it to show either. So I'm going to try and hold the fabric as carefully as I can without stretching it too much, because the whole point is I'm trying to get it to stay a little bit more sturdy while I put the waistband in later. And then, as you can see, that stitch along the top is just going to hold my fabric in place while I then put in my waistband, which is what we're going to do next. We're going to pin that in place using my nice trick method on how to do this, which I learned from my auntie Trish. So to make this method easier, what I've done is I've found the centre of my waistband back and front, and I've also found the quarters here. The way I've done that is I folded it in half using the seam that we created, found the half there, popped a pin in it, and then did it the same the other way around. So found those two centres, which then gave me these quarters. I'm then going to do the same to the skirt, but because this one hasn't got a back seam, I'm going to use the side seams as my reference and then find the centre from there. So we're going to put 2 side seams together like so, and then we're going to pull the fabric out from there, and that center fold there will give me my back piece. So I'm going to pop a pin in there so I know where it is, and then you're going to do the same, repeat the same method to find the front. So that bit there, and I'm going to pop a pin in to mark where that is. The next step is to decide which is going to be your front and which is going to be the back of your fabric. Obviously, because I put it off, it's really hard to now tell, but I think that's probably the right way around. I'm then going to get the back of the skirt where I've put that pin for the centre and line it up with the centre of the back of my waistband. What you want to do is always remember, if you don't want it to be seen, right sides to right sides. So I'm going to put the side that I do want to be visible against the side of the right side of the fabric, so that the seam bits are facing out and the 2 correct bits or nice bits are facing each other. And I'm just going to pin the fabric to the waistband going right up to the edge. Okay, and then I'm going to repeat that method all the way around this waistband using the corners and the front. I'm repeating that method on the corners, so I'm taking that side seam and putting it where the quarter was on the waistband. Again, right sides together, and then repeating that on the other side. So there you go. Make sure that side seam matches up. I don't recommend putting your pins in your mouth, but I'll tell you now, show me somebody who sews who doesn't. It just makes life so much easier when you haven't got enough limbs. So that is my 4 corners done. I'm now going to quarter all of that again. And the way I'm going to do that is by finding the center of both my waistband and my fabric. So I'm going to put these 2 pins together, find the center of the fabric here when it folds, and then do the same on the other side. And then I'm going to put those 2 points together and add a pin there to hold it in place. We then repeat that over and over again, so getting all the quarters, putting the 2 pieces together, find the half there, find the half in your fabric, bring those 2 pieces together, and put a pin in it. Once I've done all 4 of the quarters, depending on how wide your circumference is, you could then go in and do this again, doing the same method, taking it in half and then finding the middle and pinning it. I'm not going to do that just because it's going to take too long and I just don't need it for this particular skirt because the circumference isn't too big and I'm not necessarily needing to have lots of little tiny gathers. But also I would say, and I do this a lot myself, as I'm pinning, I'll pin what's easier, but I might then go back around and realise that there's a pin or two. So for example, all the other pins are on the fabric side, and this one I've put on the wrong side. So make sure that they're all on the same side with your pins. So it's going to make it easier for you with your sewing machine. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sew it so that the fabric side is up. Just because obviously I want to make sure that I catch all this fabric as I'm doing it. So I'm going to run this through the sewing machine now. Back over to my sewing machine. So I'm going to revert back to the stitch that I had before, which was the 2.5, which is just a standard stitch that comes when you turn this on. That's what it will default to. I am going to remove this part of my sewing machine because when I'm doing anything circular, this just makes me be able to run the fabric through better because it can come underneath the machine rather than out to the side. It's really useful when you're doing like things like sleeves because obviously they can get quite tight and really hard to like keep your fabric out of the way while you're trying to do this. So I'm going to find the back of this skirt again as roughly as I can. So I'm going to use the waistband to tell me where the back of this skirt is, and I'm going to flip it over so that I've got my fabric side up, just because for me at this moment in time that is going to be the easier option to attach this to. I'm going for a 1/2 inch seam now, so I'm making sure the edge of the fabric slash elastic is lined up with that 1/2 inch mark on my sewing machine, and then I'm going to drop the foot just before that center pin, because I'm going to do a couple of back stitches to hold it in place right at the very back. Okay, so I've done that stitch now. Now here comes the fun slash slightly more difficult part. What you're going to want to do is I'm going to grab the back of the elastic and I'm going to pull it so it's full tension now as I run everything through. I'm not going to touch the actual fabric itself, apart from if I need to readjust to make sure it's still in alignment, but you're going to pull the elastic, put it back there, hopefully. It's hard to show you, but you're going to pull the elastic like so that you're pulling it as close to you and as far away from you as you can as you send that through the machine, trying to keep that tension for as long as possible. Every so often you'll have to stop, release, move your hand down and pull a bit more. So I'm going to do that now. So I've just got to the end of doing that, so I'm just going to do another back stitch just to secure that in place. And lift the foot, put it off to the side and cut away any of the excess threads. I'm now going to take out all the pins and see what it looks like so far. Okay, so now I'm going to turn the skirt back that way, and there you can see we've got ourselves a nice little waistband and it's all sort of gathered nicely at the top. Now at this point, I think the next thing to do is to try it on just to see whether I want to do a top stitch around the top of the waistband here, which would basically just like pull that fabric tight at the top there and like give me a little seam that you'd see. I'm not sure whether I need to do that or not, but we'll see what it looks like once I put it on. So this is the skirt sort of finished, actually. I don't think it needs anything else. I think that's really pretty. I'm really happy with that. You can see that's the black waistband, and the likelihood is I'd wear it with a black top anyway. Maybe not this particular top, and maybe not with these particular socks, but that's turned out really nicely. It fits really nicely. It's got enough gather just to give it some movement. The only thing I might do, and it depends on what I do with the top, maybe I'll add like a little bit of like lace to the bottom, but I think that's hit a really good length on me. It's just covering my knee, and I think it's a really nice, comfy, easy way to wear some Halloween. Onto the top. So obviously what I had left from where I cut off the skirt is sort of made it more like a crop top. And I'll be honest, I'm not a massive fan of crop tops. That's just a personal preference. So the idea I had, it's not hemmed or anything yet, was to add sort of like a lace border along the bottom, which I've just pinned in place just for visuals at the moment, just to create me a little bit more length. The other idea I did have was combining what was left of this top with a plaid shirt. But I think I'm going to save that project for maybe getting myself some kind of like Disney material and doing that another day. The reason for that is because if I keep the top as is and just add this like lace at the bottom, I could still wear the skirt with the top, so it's like a two-piece outfit, but I then still wear them separately. So that I can sort of do either or, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go with the lace along the bottom. I'm going to obviously hem this properly before I do that. And then I may also add a little bit of lace to the sleeves. But we're going to tackle this part first. Get it hemmed, get it pinned, and get it all sewn in. And we'll go from there. Okay, so there's a couple ways I could do this. But the first thing I am going to do is I'm going to overlock the bottom of the t-shirt. Just to keep it all in place, stop any fraying, etc. before I then make a decision on whether then I'm going to hem it by itself, or I could sort of, using the lace, create myself a hem with the way that I'd stitch it together. So I'm going to just quickly go and overlock this. Once you've finished overlocking whatever garment it is you're doing, you always let it run a little bit further and then cut. This is just going to help you in future. Where I did thread, you obviously cut a lot closer to this. You want to let it run out a bit so that it doesn't unhook itself for when you do your next project. And that is the hem sort of overlocked. Now the decision comes on how we actually put together the lace onto the bottom. So now we've got our top laid out. The two options I have now is to either, I would just hem this as such. So I'd turn that bit under, just go from the back so it'll be easier to show you. Stitch that down, and then I would insert the lace so that it was that way around underneath, and therefore give me a nice even hem. Or option two is we lay it like this. So this is the edge that would, if I went the other way around, be underneath anyway. We line it up with our overlocked hem and we stitch that way, and that would mean when we then fold back down and over like so, it will create us a hem and also give us a little bit more length. And I think that's the version I'm going to do. I then what would need to do afterwards is do a top stitch, but I'll show you how I do that in a bit. That's all the lace pinned into place. So obviously I'm going with utilising the lace to give me my hem. When it got to the two edges of the lace, what I've done is made sure that the bit that will be on show has been folded back so that it doesn't leave me with a rawer edge. And then I'll when I stitch everything, I'll stitch all this all together so it all lines up, so that you sort of, hopefully because it's on the side, won't notice the join. But I've also put some of my pins in so you can see that when you fold it out, it sort of now creates me a nice hem here, and that's where I'll do my top stitching. So next step is to throw this through the sewing machine. Okay, so now that I've attached the lace to the top, you can see that you can just see the overlocking coming through, because obviously I've done the smallest of hems I could possibly do. So the next thing for me to do is do what they call a top stitch, which will basically mean that I can roll that underneath and I will top stitch on top here, which means it will hide the white and it will give me a nice clean edge. I'm probably going to put a couple of pins in just to hold it all in place, and then we'll run it back through the sewing machine. So I've top stitched that all down, so now you can't see any of that overlocking thread, and it gives me a nice neat edge. So that is what it's currently looking at. Now the decision is, do I put any darts to give the top a bit more shape, and do I add any of that lace to the sleeves, which also means, do I add any lace to the skirt? Decisions, decisions, decisions. This is the completed transformation. So I obviously have got the lace that I added to the bottom of the top part. I did go ahead and add some lace to the arms as well. And just to tie it all together, I've also put some lace around the bottom of the skirt. So that's what it looks like together as a set. All that's left to do is to try it on and see how we can style it. So this is the top on. It still was a little bit croppy for me, so I have put a black vest top underneath. Obviously I took it, sort of gave it some darts on the back just to give it a bit more shape. As you can see that they've got the lace at the bottom there, and then you've got the lace on the sleeves. Just gives it that little bit more. I've paired it with my Halara jeans. They are really comfy. They're like a dark greyish denim, and then I've also popped it with my pumpkin sort of, they're kind of like Converse style shoes that I think I got off of either Temu or Shein last year, and therefore I've popped it with my pumpkin earrings just to add that more pop of colour, because this is a bit more of a casual look as it's just a top. I've also got my Halloween scarf that says boo, and it's got some similar sort of patterning on it. Obviously the only difference is that the pumpkins on this one are not Mickey, so I've got that to go with it, because I'd probably also wear this with a hoodie. The other thing that I could also pair with this, just to give it that finishing, as I've got my little pumpkin beret that I got from, where did I get this from? Oh, the Lost Cauldron. So I could put that on just to finish off the look. So you've got a bit of orange on top, orange in the shoes, and yeah, so that's the top half of that dress, now in a wearable t-shirt. This is how I've decided to style the skirt. I've got some black tights on, I've got some sort of like Victorian vintage style boots. I've paired it with my Hell Bunny jumper because it's got like the lace effect at the top. I've also popped on my little back belt just to cover the waistband, and of course my new favourite accessory, which is the pumpkin beret. I have gone with little spiderweb earrings this time, so that's sort of a cute autumnal look with the skirt. If I wanted to make it a bit more casual, I could probably pop on my little sneakers and maybe switch out the top for something a little bit plainer. So I've got this one which has got like little ghosties on, that could look quite cute, but this is what I've gone with for the skirt. Again, could add in my scarf to go with. That just makes a nice little cute autumnal outfit. All we have to do now is see what it looks like with both the top and the skirt together, and I think that'll be it. And this is what it looks like if I just put the top and skirt together. I probably would, like I did before, put a black vest top underneath just for comfort. I quite like the way that it sort of sits a little bit forward of the skirt. I've kept the little waistband on as well. Yep. Keeping on the boots. And again, we can always add back in the beret. I really like the beret. I'm slightly obsessed with the beret now. So yeah, that is sort of 3 ways I can style it. 4 if you include the fact that if I change out my boots for some sneakers that just casualise it a bit. But yeah, I'm really happy with this upcycle. And I've gone from 1 item to 2. I hope you've enjoyed this video and coming along with me as I transformed a dress that I got in a charity shop into 2 new items, and hopefully you've learnt some tips and tricks about sewing along the way. I'm hoping to bring some more videos like this in the future, but until then, stay safe and I'll see you next time.